The phrase Good Samaritan has become part of our everyday language. In 2022, we would define a Good Samaritan as a generous person who is always helping people who are in trouble without thinking about it. There are even hospitals that have been named the Good Samaritan. In doing some research, I found out that in the time of Jesus, the word good and Samaritan did not mix together, just like oil and water do not mix together. This would have been especially true to a devout Jewish person like Jesus and his audience. Even though the Samaritans and Jewish people were related in their religious beliefs of one God and the Messianic law, the Jewish people resented the Samaritans because they had intermarried and adapted to some of the cultures of the people who invaded them hundreds of years before the time of Jesus. The Samaritans, on the whole, were considered much worse in the Jewish people's minds than even me and you, the Gentiles, which means people not of Jewish origin. Now back to the parable that Jesus shared with his friends and followers, all of whom were devout Jews, and the question, who is your neighbor? Let me begin by sharing a story with you that happened recently in Williamsville, New York. I have shared this story in the past, so that if you have heard it, please bear with me. This story that I will share is told to you from the eyes of an older woman in her 60s named Susan as she lies on the side of the road on Mill Street by Sheridan Drive. She is unable to move because she is pinned under her hover-around chair, which flipped over. Now, it is late at night, around 1 a.m, and Susan was on her way back from Wegmans, where she had gone to purchase some groceries. She lives at the St. Mary's complex on Mill Street in a senior citizen's apartment. She shops at this time because there is less traffic and she can travel uninterrupted down Mill Street in her hover-around chair. Susan had made too sharp of a turn and flipped the motorized chair onto its side. She was pinned under the chair and spilled all of her groceries. If that wasn't bad enough, Susan has only one leg because of complications of her diabetes, and she's a bit overweight. She lays there on the side of Mill Street on that chilly night, crying and thinking that this was going to be her last night on earth and that God had forsaken her because she had laid in that position for over 2 hours. More than 5 cars had traveled past her, slowed down, but never stopped to help her. Then there were 2 young adults who were coming from Glen Falls Park. They slowed down, pulled over, and stopped. The young woman told her boyfriend, "I think there is a person there." They got out of their car and found Susan, who was crying and could not believe her good fortune that God had not forsaken her and finally sent someone to help her. The young couple picked up her motorized chair and helped Susan back into it. As the young woman made sure that Susan was not injured, her boyfriend picked up the groceries that had spilled out on Mill Street. The young couple carried the groceries and walked along the side of Susan and her hover-around chair, helping her get back into her apartment at St. Mary's. You see, my brothers and sisters, Susan, like the victim in the parable, was unable to resist and had to accept the godly mercy from a stranger, a person that they least expected. In the gospel, it was a Samaritan, and for Susan, it was a young couple returning from a romantic walk in the park. The young couple and the Samaritan acted the way they did because it was the right thing to do, not for financial gain or feel-good reasons. The young couple lived out the point of the parable that we are called to live, showing the love of God to all who are in need, whoever they may be and wherever they might be. These actions may be awkward, difficult, or inconvenient. However, the Samaritan, as well as the young couple, did not appear to have any difficulty extending kindness to those in less fortunate situations. At the end of the parable, Jesus asked the scholar of the law a question. Which of these, in your opinion, was a neighbor? The scholar answered, the one who treated him with mercy. Jesus said to him and to each one of us, go and do likewise. Our charge is not just to give lip service to this message. We cannot just say it. We must actually take action, as the young couple has shown us by their actions in the story which I shared with you today. So, as we gather around the table of the Lord, let us ask Jesus to help us in our belief that our God is a God of unexpected mercy and grace, a God who may use unworthy people, sometimes even the most unlikely ones, or people you may not even like, to share the grace of God. Our God is a God of new life who brings hope even out of terrible situations, who turns death into new life. Let us spend this week looking at our responses to the situations that we are faced with in the light of the charge given to each of us by Jesus and demonstrated for us by the young couple who came to the aid of a stranger. And may God grant you the peace that the world cannot.